I did an event study to investigate the effects of currency devaluation on the stock market in Egypt.
I'm designing a thermal actuation jacket which provides a sense of touch.
My capstone is a humorous piece of creative nonfiction about narratives of women in the South Asian diaspora.
My capstone is cricket and crime rate. It focuses on how cricket game outcomes affect crime rate in Karnataka, India.
I'm working on improving the security of self-driving cars in adversarial conditions.
I'm looking at NATO membership and I'm analyzing whether being a member of the organization makes countries spend more or less than what they would if they weren't members of the organization.
So I'm working on improving the performance of an object detection algorithm, YOLO, which is used in self-driving cars.
My capstone explores what drove Americans to engage with propaganda on Twitter around the US presidential election in 2016.
My capstone is called Bulbul, and it's an online application which allows Arabic speakers to test their knowledge in Arabic dialects and to learn more about them.
It looks at the concept of reputation through different generations in the Emirati society.
For my capstone project, I study the ways happiness is conceptualized in the UAE, specifically the relationship between how it is framed through local media and government sources.
My group's capstone project focuses on the development of an actively stabilized payload that is equipped with a LiDAR sensor and enables three-dimensional computational modeling of topographical features.
My capstone aims to explore how stressors affect the mental health well-being of displaced and non-displaced children and adolescents within Niger.
My capstone is a hardware accelerator for the reconstruction of visual working memory.
I'm running an empirical study on a bunch of algorithms with real data to see which of them works best in real life.
I'm investigating the effect of bilingual education in the UAE on nationals, predominantly their relationship with the Arabic language and construction of Emirati identity.
My capstone asks the question, what motivates political participation among Emirati youth? So I do a comparison between youth in the 7 Emirates, and I also do a gender comparison.
My capstone explores the stigma of mental illness in the Middle East region through a visual scope.
For my capstone, I worked on investigating the association between midwach smoking in the UAE and hypertension and cardiovascular disease health outcomes.
My capstone is about dental simulation using virtual reality.
I study how threatening the stability of the gender hierarchy can cause sexist people to support violent and non-violent forms of discrimination against women.
I'm looking at the relationship between religious affiliation and the academic achievement of primary school students in Sierra Leone.
Developing a drone that would detect a rogue drone and track its position, chase it, and finally capture it with a mounted net gun.
I'm looking at the population structure of commercially important fish species in the UAE and how to make better marine protected areas.
I created a performance that is a 360-degree audio installation that's comprised of conversations between 2 NYUAD students at a time.
Understanding the influences of institutional mechanisms on the relative performance of regional blocks.
We were trying to build a low-cost turbidostat by redesigning certain elements of the existing technologies.
My capstone revolves around identifying and analyzing a specific type of subneurons in the Drosophila visual system, and they're called the transmedullary Y neurons.
My capstone is an exhibition of mixed media works that explore themes of location and memory, as well as the joy and playfulness of working with form, materiality, and color.
I analyze Emiratis' attitudes toward refugees and their preferences regarding refugee policy in the UAE.
I'm looking at ways schools in Abu Dhabi promote healthy behaviors amongst children to combat childhood obesity.
It's a cross-cultural investigation of a relationship between sexism and attitudes towards gay men and trans women.
Our capstone project was to build an area drone netting system using net guns in order to capture an invading drone.
So my capstone explores racial discrimination in the National Basketball Association by looking at serial independence by foul calls of referees.
My capstone examined the effects of an induced jet lag paradigm on depression and stress susceptibility in a mouse model.
Mobile phone diffusion and ownership and its effect on health outcomes and behaviors as well as knowledge.
How the Arab family, or the socially constructed Arab family, is moderating a relationship between depression and burnout in teachers in Lebanon.
My capstone is about the effect of implicit racial bias on face recognition of one's own race versus one's other races.
My capstone is about startup development in the UAE, and I'm trying to see if there is a relationship between entrepreneurship classes and startup development.
I'm looking at the effect of foreign direct investment on entrepreneurial activity in Egypt. I'm looking to assess whether FDI affects startups in a positive or a negative manner.
I was researching various organizations in New York City and their data collection systems and designing a software for offline solution.
I studied the ratio of the volumes of two sets associated with a given square matrix, the product numerical range and numerical range.
Our capstone combines biology and engineering to build a low-cost turbidostat that provides cell cultures with constant environmental conditions.
My capstone is in the philosophy of language, and it's about how we use certain words to refer to the things that they refer to.
In my capstone, I'm trying to estimate the impact of carbon trade under the European Union emissions trading system on employment rates in the region.
My capstone is on young expatriates in the UAE. My study looks at how young expatriates come to negotiate their identity within the UAE.
So my capstone project is about the recent immigration phenomenon in Poland of primarily Ukrainian citizens, and I'm exploring their effect on the wages in the Polish labor market.
For my capstone, I research on the professionalization and development of UAE-based art galleries and focus in how their role as cultural entrepreneurs evolved over time.
For my capstone, I do a survey in the Himalayas where I study 420 university students to understand how much they're willing to pay to adapt to the impacts of climate change.
My capstone is a system for analyzing intensive care unit patients and finding similar patients from the history of the ICU unit to make accurate and useful predictions and recommendations for treatments for future patients.
My capstone is called Recontextualizing Folk Music through Contemporary Styles, and it involves me taking a Romanian folk song called Capelunca and mixing it into multiple versions of dubstep.
For my capstone project, I studied the real cost to wed in the United Arab Emirates by examining the economic, cultural, and educational determinants of dowry or mahar in the UAE.
My capstone tests for the existence of racial, nationality, and skin tone income discrimination in the most popular football league, English Premier League.
For my research, I'm looking at the effect of female marriage migration on child health outcomes in urban India.
My capstone is about designing a new material that absorbs lithium from seawater because the lithium natural reserves are quickly depleting since it's the main element that is used to produce the batteries that power all electronic devices.
My capstone focuses on the Syrian refugee crisis in Jordan, and I trace the relationship between displacement management, development planning, and refugee disempowerment from an ethnographic perspective.
My capstone is about Swaziland, Lesotho, and Botswana, which are three countries in southern Africa, and how they were created during the British Empire.
My capstone is the reconstruction of the horologium of Harun al-Rashid.
My capstone aims to study the relationship between a city's level of intelligence and its net waves of migration.
My capstone is a comparison between the no-self view in Buddhism and depersonalization, which is a mental condition where people feel like they're estranged from themselves.
I worked on designing a system that can analyze the visits of patients to intensive care unit and recommend treatments to those patients to improve their health.
It's about investigating immunoglobulin M response to malaria infection, and I'm trying to look at genetic basis of IgM level changes.
My capstone is a philosophical investigation into journalism and how it's not always easy to be objective.
We're developing a deep learning-based visual tracking system for PTZ cameras, tracking UAVs.
My capstone assesses the impact of pre-colonial political institutions and one's level of education and ethnic voting behavior in sub-Saharan Africa.
I surveyed 180 NYUAD students to investigate why they download movies.
My capstone explores politics of memory surrounding a historical event called Jeju April 3rd massacres.
I'm designing a user-customizable gender-aware machine translation system that provides the appropriate translations according to the user's gender.
My capstone is a graphic novel about the Mana pearl fishery off the coast of Sri Lanka.
I directed an abridged version of the play Tango Palace by Maria Irene Fornes about two men who are locked in a room together and engage in violent power struggles to get out.
My capstone studies the left-wing student politics of the European Kurdish diaspora from the 1960s to the 1980s.
My capstone explores the role of the analog in social intimacy.
My capstone explores the theme of saudade
through an estranged grandson-grandfather relationship that takes place throughout an afternoon.
My capstone is a series of charcoal and gesso paintings that deconstruct the idealization of male beauty through ancient Greek statues.
My capstone focuses on the legal frameworks around sex work in the Netherlands, South Africa, and Sweden.
In my capstone, I am focusing on the investigation of the impact of national regulations on development of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies on the dataset of 93 countries. It's one of the very first researchers in this area.
We are building a decentralized forum built on blockchain.
My capstone is about the debunking argument of evaluative realism.
I wrote a book about walking in New York.
My capstone is discussing how zakat, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, compares to normative ethical approaches, which are usually Western-based.
My capstone is titled Islamic Education in the UAE, Promoting State Interests, Nation Branding, and Defending Against Islamism, and basically looks at how the Islamic education textbooks work to promote state policy.
I'm studying Asya Jabbar's Fantasia and Algerian Cavalcade and Sahar Khalifa's Wild Thorns and the Sunflower as resistance literature and how both authors challenge the genre.
I'm trying to understand what technological constraints and monetary properties of Bitcoin determine its transaction tips.
I created a novel dataset to assess Chinese public diplomacy programming in the US.
My capstone is looking at economic pass-throughs to coffee farmers in Brazil. That is looking at what percentage of the international coffee price ends up going to the farmers.
My capstone studies income and gender inequality in education in the Gambia.
We're working on acyl-teens, which are the heaviest fraction of crude oil. They tend to cause a lot of deposition and clogging in pipelines and oil wells, so we're trying to find chemical inhibitors that can prevent that process.
I'm working on designing and implementing a decentralized, censorship-proof online forum.
I looked at proteins, specifically nuclear myosin 1, and its involvement in the DNA damage pathway in mammals.
My capstone analyzes the effect of household net wealth on the education choices of their children.
The relationship between teacher stress and the quality of teacher-child interactions in early childhood settings.
The one person show that explores Hungarian identity in a giant deep fryer.
I studied a subset of the complex plane called the numerical range and the conditions under which the numerical range is an ellipse or the convex hull of a number of ellipses.
I worked on identifying the role of beta-actin in the direct reprogramming of embryonic fibroblasts into osteoblast cells.
So my capstone is about looking at the behavioral differences in how people achieve goals among different age groups, and also looking at what kind of factors promote successful goal achieving.
My capstone is a performance studies analysis of Beirut Pride, looking specifically at how removing pride from the Western context highlights our implicit notions of what pride should be.
My capstone examines the relationship between the quality of early childhood caregiving and the development of attachment representation in Chinese children.
My capstone is a virtual reality simulation of dental procedures.
My capstone examines how mothers from 3 cultural communities in New York City, Münster, Germany, and Chennai, India, describe their gift-giving and gift-receiving practices with their toddlers.
My capstone project looks at an Ethiopian frog species. We're trying to understand the speciation process to see how this lineage diverged in the Ethiopian highlands.
In my capstone, I investigated how long-term residents in a gentrified neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, made sense of the process by comparing themselves to other groups who moved into the neighborhood.
The capstone is about if it's possible to reach the optimal state of utility with a fixed number of capital.
My capstone is a system to discover hypernyms, or the is-a language relationship, like Chihuahua is a type of dog.
My capstone is a paper on the metaphysics of consciousness. More specifically, I examine what the notion of structure should amount to in the debate between physicalism and anti-physicalism of consciousness.
So my capstone explores the discursive strategies employed by stigmatized individuals to enable their empowerment and inclusion in society.
My capstone focuses on the analysis of corporate social responsibility, CSR, which tries to figure out if government mandate impacts the way firms conduct CSR activities.
My capstone explores how Sharia is employed in South Asia in the realm of women's rights to create rights where they don't ordinarily exist, particularly when it comes to female divorce.
Me and my project partner, we're designing a water filtration device that uses scrap paper. And the idea is that you take a stack of scrap paper, put it in our device, and it will filter the water for you.
How political changes have affected religiosity in Egypt from 1970 to 2016.
10-minute short narrative. So when a law passes that requires female university students to undergo virginity testing, this girl crashes a class that's meant to help her pass the test.
I'm designing an educational building utilizing ultra-lightweight concrete.
My capstone is in the field of vertical farming, where I'm developing a microsensor that you can plug into the plant and measure the particular nutrient uptake.
My capstone looks at whether the large-scale development of industrial parks in China have any kind of effect on innovation activities.
My capstone tests the Jovanovic and Bunkwinski's hypothesis that acquisition attempts convey negative information about bidders' existing projects with empirical data.
My capstone is about investigating how team composition and identity affects the usage of pseudonyms of cryptocurrency company members.
My capstone explores political participation in Europe, and primarily I'm talking about what groups of voters are more inclined to have interest in politics, trust politicians, and how can populist movement reverse it.
My capstone looks at understanding voter behavior in the context of distributive politics when there's asymmetric information, how voters vote against policies that are beneficial for society.
We investigated whether the visual system can extract properties such as average orientation, location, and size from sets of objects, even when you're not consciously aware of having seen any of those objects.
For my capstone project, I've synthesized nanoparticles that specifically deliver drugs to leukemic cells.
My capstone examines the relationship between taking pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is a drug which prevents new HIV infections, and sexual behavior and sexual health outcomes of men who have sex with men.
My capstone examines whether performance contracts have an effect on maternal and child health services in Rwanda.
My capstone is based on a 14-week data and interview collection across think tanks in Washington, D.C. Specifically, it looks at how this recent shift towards corporate and country donors has resulted in an increased bias within think tank research.
I built a robot that mimics tail shedding of a lizard.
The Capstone project is focused on developing a remote-controlled car with a PV panel charging its battery.
Our team worked on improving the performance of self-driving cars in adversarial conditions. Specifically, I worked on the computer vision part, and we designed a novel lane detection algorithm for detecting curved lane lines.
For our capstone, we are trying to reduce the amount of time it takes to evacuate a building using certain geometries for the room.
My capstone is focused on self-healing crystals, and we're interested in investigating the relationship between material properties and self-healing in selected crystals of boronic esters and disulfides.
My capstone is about investigating what are the variations in trust towards electronic voting.
My capstone project targets the turbofan engines in a commercial aircraft. We are trying to reduce the weight of the engine and improve performance specifications by redesigning the thrust reverser systems.
My capstone is a series of paintings and screen prints that explore the idea of ephemerality and temporary interactions in Abu Dhabi.
My capstone looks at global changes in gene expression patterns in the livers of zebrafish larvae and how these change in response to different types of stress.
I look into the emergence of Airbnb in Dubai and see what potential impact it might have on the long-term rental rates across Dubai.
I'm studying the capital structure choices of firms in the UAE that is based on the family ownership features and the corporate governance standards here.
Written from interviews with students in New York and Abu Dhabi. On Our Borders is a theatrical verbatim performance with original music about third culture kids and the questions that in-between cultureness reveals.
I'm doing a comparative analysis of how experience affects baseball players' salaries, and I take evidence from South Korea and USA.
My capstone is about the parahippocampal place area, which is a region in the brain that activates in the presence of scenes and how it temporally and spatially integrates scenes.
I'm observing the outcomes of iVoting in Estonia.
The goal of our capstone is to build a turbidostat, which is a device to maintain a constant cell culture to make sure that cells grow in the most efficient way possible.
So the basic idea is that attention can not only be directed to the external environment, but also to internal information that we hold in our working memory.
My capstone was an online survey experiment that tested whether perspective taking could help reduce homophobic behavior in the short run in Mexico.
I am analyzing people's interest in privacy in democratic and non-democratic countries.
I'm developing scientific hardware to enable frequent localized aerial surveying of geographical features, with a particular focus on glaciers.
My capstone explores the fall in ethnic identification in Nigeria before the 2015 national elections.
My capstone is about a famous UN resolution on women, peace and security, and why Finland adopted it so late in the process, 8 years after the resolution itself was adopted in the UN.
My capstone is associated with calculating identities related to Stifel, Whitney, and Wu classes, which capture difference between different topological shapes.
My capstone is about how do the excluded members of a nation state make sense of their identity and citizenship. More specifically, I'm looking into the case of Pakistan and one of the religious minorities over there.
My capstone investigates the incentives for countries to join the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative.
My capstone is about the influx of Chinese foreign direct investment and aid into the ASEAN region and how that affects the region's voting agreement with both China and the US in the UN General Assembly.
My capstone measures the level of financial literacy among university students in Abu Dhabi.
My capstone is about a personal differential equation model called the Black-Scholes equation, which is a finance equation developed by Black and Scholes in helping option traders make the best decision in trying to buy options in finance.
My capstone aims to optimize palmitic acid production in the green algae chloridium in order to find a potential sustainable palm oil production alternative.
My capstone is building a random number generator which translates muon strikes, their position and their angle, to random numbers.
In my physics capstone, I studied the connection between the macroscopic properties of galaxies and the rate at which these galaxies form stars. And in my philosophy capstone, I studied normative uncertainty, essentially trying to answer the question of what you should do when you don't know what to do.
My capstone examines a decade worth of rainfall and voting data to analyze how drought affects political preferences in Australia.
Estimating labor market participation and employment transitions for single disadvantaged men in the United States.
Algorithmically analyzing music from live shows and concerts, and then generating visuals for them in real time.
I studied museum practices of Emiratis at the Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum.
My capstone is a collection of artworks that unveils some of the ghosts that currently haunt Costa Rica.
So my capstone is about designing a 3-storied school building in the UAE that focuses on saving the energy cost considering the high temperatures that occurs usually throughout the year in this country.
My capstone is about a young boy who is trying to figure out what he loves to do versus what his family wants him to do.
My capstone is a philosophical investigation into the ontological origin of gender inequality, and it takes Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex and then a number of other texts from both Islamic and Christian backgrounds and investigates how that philosophical framework maps onto other feminist theories across history.
My capstone examines the behavioral responses of 2 modelfish species from the Arabian Gulf to extreme thermal stress and changes in time of day.
So my capstone is a virtual reality experience that explores racial identities and stereotypes and the way we interact with them, in a global setting.
So for my capstone, I'm writing jazz poetry and also researching into its genre.
My capstone is a self-portrait series exhibition called Idle Contortions, and through using my own body as a subject, I explore how the physical body manifests thoughts and emotions.
My capstone looks at different measures of economic living standards and see whether they can consistently predict over time communal budgets in the Ile-de-France region.
My capstone is focused on developing learning-based tracking systems for PTZ cameras.
Memory is a Partial Victory Over Death is a site-specific dance performance that speaks about remembering memories amidst material disintegration.
I'm developing a system of automated post-editing on Arabic to Japanese machine translation.
So I'm studying the effects of mortality salience, so death-related thoughts, on biculturals, specifically Chinese Americans, through an implicit attentional capture task.
So my capstone involves developing and testing drug delivery systems to specifically target cancer cells.
My capstone is about how attitudes towards co-ethnic groups are affected or not affected by identity salience and information correction mechanisms, and I do this through a survey administered in South Korea towards ethnic Koreans in or from China.
We're studying how a traffic control system that works very well with 100% knowledge of vehicle data would work with less than 100% knowledge of vehicle data.
I have built a web app called Good Living that provides new features for property search that allow you to search based on distance constraints.
My capstone was looking at Bosnian refugee families who were resettled to the United States during the Bosnian War in the 90s, and it's looking at the long-term consequences of refugee resettlement as a durable solution from the UN.
The design of an implicit emotion communication system using vibrothermal perception to induce different types of emotions.
I'm looking at how the size of startups influences their willingness to engage in inter-firm cooperation in the media industry.
My capstone project is on gender differences in loss aversion. People's tendency to engage or not in risky behavior affects their returns, making it important to investigate what drives this decision-making process.
I'm working on analyzing a traffic control algorithm by looking at marginal penetration rates of connected and autonomous vehicles to address one of the major assumptions the original algorithm took.
My capstone is about the effect of Chinese aid in sub-Saharan Africa and how that influences sub-Saharan African countries' voting behavior in the United Nations.
For my capstone, I compared Islamic and conventional banks in the UAE and their performance over the last 15 years.
My capstone is a 10-minute documentary film about a long-term expat living in the UAE. It explores themes of dreams, reality, and everything that happens in between.
My capstone is on distributive politics, trying to understand what explains the allocation of state resources in Ukraine, socioeconomic development, or party politics.
My capstone studies how network structures affect the diffusion of information goods when there are limited resale opportunities.
In my capstone, I'm studying the impact of infrastructure development on the economic growth with the evidence from China.
My capstone is titled Noah. It's a speculative fiction hybrid that combines a screenplay as well as prose, and it is about an African American young man who grows up in a reality where slavery never existed.
On the most rewarding day of her career, my protagonist Radhika has to hide her success from her fiancé to prevent throwing the relationship off balance.
My capstone is about obstruction design, so it's trying to explore ways we can make evacuation more effective. The idea is to explore the room dynamics to figure out the most effective way that we can pursue evacuation from a room.
I'm developing an Android mobile application which will help improve internet conditions by allowing people to create and distribute content more easily.
I'm using radio astronomy to measure the mass of a black hole in a dwarf galaxy.
My capstone evaluates the performance of Chinese takeovers in Europe against a benchmark of comparable European companies.
My capstone is about predicting corporate bankruptcy using expenditure per employee, which is an indicator of how the management chooses to allocate its resources.
We're creating a drone aerial netting system.
I'm working on the security side to attack detectors for autonomous cars using adversarial examples.
I'm looking at how exposure to objectified depictions of women in music videos could engender increased acceptance of violence against them among viewers.
It's an egocentric network analysis of social entrepreneurs.
I am trying to assess the diversity of phytoplankton and bacteria out here on the local Abu Dhabi coast. And phytoplankton and bacteria form the base of the marine food web.
My capstone is looking at subject-verb agreement in Hindi and how that affects processing of language.
Capstone is about lifting squares in 2D to half spaces in 3D, and we think it'll be a novel approach to help other proof techniques.
I studied the long-run economic impact of ancient nomadic people in Asian highland.
My capstone project is about extending an existing least-super algebra by 2 dimensions, one central extension and one outer derivation.
My capstone is a design of a radio-controlled car with dual power sources of solar energy and battery power, and in the role of an electrical engineer, I'm working on the design of a PCB charger that's going to be used to charge the battery from the solar panel and provide the power to the motor.
My capstone looks at the pearl fisheries in the Gulf of Mannar and those in the Persian Gulf, and through that attempts to reconceptualize both gulfs as shared spaces.
My thesis explores Hong Kong's post-colonial identity using the work of 2 Hong Kong poets, Leung Ping Kwan and Louise Ho, and I will specifically be looking at this poetic strategies that they use to preserve Hong Kong's unique culture and post-colonial identity.
My team and I are working on reconstructing an archaic castle water clock that was considered to be the first programmable analog computer in its time, using new engineering analysis techniques and modern manufacturing processes.
I'm investigating the effect of black holes on their host galaxies through running numerical cosmological simulations.
My capstone explores the discovery of religion through the eyes of a little kid.
It's a paper-based water filtration system for developing regions around the world.
So my capstone project was an interactive installation that I designed to investigate the relationship between technology and nature, and because of that I titled it Nature That Quote.
My capstone looks at how UAE residents and nationals navigate entrepreneurship differently.
In my capstone, I explore the usage of product lifecycle management and standardization in the area of IoT to support business intelligence and innovation.
My capstone gives people information about income inequality and see if that changes their preferences for taxation redistribution on different income brackets.
I'm working on an autonomous drone capturing system.
For my capstone, I'm working on a peer-to-peer distributed system built with blockchain for online decentralized forums.
My capstone studies the effect of macroeconomic policies on real estate rental prices in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi.
My capstone project is about investigating the effects of political propaganda on voters, specifically within the context of Hungary.
We are developing a learning-based tracking system for pan-tilt zoom camera systems to track commercial drones.
I'm designing a mathematical model that predicts the resilience of tropical forests to selective cutting.
So it's 4 of us working on a low-cost turbidostat, which is a machine that keeps the flow in a cell culture, maintains the nutrients, and avoids any depletion of the nutrients so that the culture can sustain and we can experiment.
I'm analyzing the effect that music production has on a piece of composition. So I'm taking a piece of music and producing it in 4 different ways, and then looking what music production does to it.
My capstone team is building a semi-autonomous car which runs on solar energy and battery power, and I'm specifically involved in designing the bidirectional radio communication.
I'll be analyzing 3 films and seeing how Van Gogh paintings are being portrayed within them, and how does the audience react to reproductions and not the originals within the films.
My capstone research is on structure annotation of music using supervised machine learning, which is about trying to find out which part of a song is intro, chorus, or verse, and so on.
I'm explaining the variation in voting preferences among developing countries at the United Nations.
Influence of macroeconomic indicators on the spread between emerging markets and US bonds between January 2008 and December 2017.
My capstone looks into the impact of gender interviewer on survey responses in a survey conducted in the DRC.
My capstone is on China's Belt Road Initiative, and I'm trying to prove that receiving countries have the agency to decide whether they want that investment or not.
My capstone is to understand how social networks affect the likelihood to practice entrepreneurship for women in sub-Saharan Africa.
My capstone is a comparative study on different health insurance policies across different countries.
My capstone looks at the recent trends in energy investment in developing countries and the determinants of investment in renewable energy in particular in these countries.
My capstone is about the economic and political determinants of youth protest participation, and I'm specifically looking at the Armenian Velvet Revolution of 2018.
My capstone is about the effect of perturbation frequencies on reaching movements.
My capstone is a socially engaged art project that strives to provide a platform for people of NYU Abu Dhabi to connect.
My capstone is a comparative study of social media use of the platforms Facebook and WeChat amongst Chinese and American college students to better understand the extent to which technological platforms, network effects, and cultural differences shape online interactions.
My capstone studies the impact of depression on sleep and also how we can manipulate sleep to alleviate depression.
My capstone looks at the link between passion and narrative identity.
My capstone is a long poem that explores the balance between my own creative voice and my passion for the poetry of T.S. Eliot.
My capstone is a docu-fiction film about the drifting subjectivities of the Southeast Asian migrants in Abu Dhabi, blurring the line between fantasy and reality.
I use regression in the data from CV to analyze the impact of gender, marital status, school quality, and the highest degree towards expected salary in China.
My capstone looks at this study published last year, which claims that one reason for gender differences in labor market outcome is that women are more likely to volunteer for tasks with low promotability. And my capstone tests the robustness of this claim by looking at the extent to which framing might have an impact on gender differences in the game of chicken.
My capstone is about the simulations for sinking spherical particles in the ocean.
My capstone looked into ways to reduce prejudice and foster inclusive intergroup behavior through evidence-based interventions.
Slovakia.
Egypt. Germany originally.
I'm from Ethiopia.
I'm from the UAE.
Colombia.
Jordan.
South Korea.
Pakistan.
I'm from Abu Dhabi.
Lithuania.
I'm from Dubai. Syria.
I'm from Denmark and Yemen.
Ukraine.
Abu Dhabi.
From the United States.
I'm from China.
Ogden, Utah in the US.
El Salvador. Georgia.
Bosnia.
Bulgaria.
Russia.
From Athens, Greece.
I'm Jordanian Palestinian originally.
Hungarian Italian.
Kazakhstan.
Ghana, Accra.
Denmark.
Hungary.
Brazil. Australia and
Croatia.
Costa Rica.
Philippines.
Slovenia.
From Moldova. Morocco. Serbia.
The UK.
South Africa.
Jamaica.
Taiwan.
Mexico.